after all these years. Finally, we have them all. Here we go.
Developer Diary 242 is out, and we finally have a release date for patch 3.3. That is the new Libra patch. We've had this in beta for quite a few weeks now, and Paradox have deigned to give us a time. Well, let's start off. Let's not keep anyone in the dark. When is it going to be released? It will be released on Wednesday, February the 23rd at 10 a.m. CET. That is Central European Time. If you're on the East Coast of America, that is 4 a.m. for you. If you're in the United Kingdom, you're looking at 9 a.m. and Europe 10 a.m. The rest of the world, obviously you can convert your own time zones, but that it is when it is coming. Only a few days now, only 6 days time. And of course, with that announcement, they have given us the final and full patch notes for patch 3.3. This is actually going to be patch 3.3.1 because I think they've classed the beta patch as 0.0. There was an update to the beta. We updated the updated beta, but I'm not sure where that actually fell in terms of their branching and naming systems. So I'm just going to start off by saying I am not going to go through the full patch notes in this video. If you'd like me to go through the full patch notes for 3.3.1, the final Libra patch notes, please let me know in the comments section. If there is enough interest, I will do a video on it, but it is rather an extensive patch notes. Instead, I'm just going to be highlighting what I think are some important features in these patch notes and talking about those. And if you enjoy this video, please release that like button. The first main takeaway from these patch notes is that nothing is fundamentally changing from the updated beta that we've been playing on. I think it's still out now. I'm actually not sure. I've not touched it for a little while, but I know that nothing in these patch notes in terms of the content, in terms of the features, and in terms of the balance has changed in the last week or so. So the patch notes we looked at recently for the updated beta, those patch notes still, generally speaking, hold true. What we have got a lot of changes here. We've got quite a few bug fixes, basically, things that they have tried to implement that they were unable to implement. Yes, they have not managed to implement the trade value fix they wanted yet, so that does mean that at present, trade value is still completely unaffected by habitability of your planets, meaning all those lovely trade builds on Tomb Worlds and random planets, well, they are still going to work fine. Merchant mechanists, I'm looking at you, and this does mean that Paradox have not changed the values of Empire size, Empire sprawl, whatever they want to call it. They have not changed the values in this final release as far as the patch notes are concerned. There is nothing here in balance talking about any changes being made to your Empire size having an effect on your tech and Unity costs. As you may know from some of the previous videos, I have been advocating for an increase in the effect we are having from Empire size. It should increase our tech costs at least 2, 3, possibly even 4 times the values we're currently seeing, because at the moment, well, I would say that in the race and the battle of tall versus wide, this patch was meant to be, or at least we've heard a lot about how tall is making a big comeback. Well, in the theatre of technology and Unity, I think that tall is still lagging far, far behind. If you don't have a larger empire, if you don't have more pops, you're not going to be able to produce as large a research output, and the penalties from having more pops, more systems, more planets is not great enough. I also think there's an issue to be made here about the balance being wrong in terms of pops being too large a weight on Empire Sprawl. I recently did a poll. It looks like most of you do agree with me there that pops should not be the main contributing factor for Empire size, but that's an aside. Anyway, as far as I'm concerned, and yes, we don't know where the meta is going to shake out yet, absolutely true. There may be some fantastic and amazing tall builds in the works, Unity-based builds that people have up their sleeves. Maybe there's some interactions that simply haven't really come to light yet with Planetary Ascension, all of that, sure. But in my opinion, wide is still stealing the game. If you have a bigger empire, many more planets, quite a few pops spread out over those worlds, meaning you have a larger number of research points generated each month, well, you're going to out-research and out-tradition your tall neighbors, which have fewer systems, fewer planets, even if they've got many pops on those planets. Yes, okay, there's also the fact that at the moment, having many pops on a small number of planets technically makes you a wide empire, which is a little odd to think about, but I'm trying to be a bit of a theoretical purist here and assume that doesn't make you wide. If you have a very large empire, you're going to definitely have a bigger economy, and you're definitely going to be a bigger threat, and your smaller neighbors are going to be left at the wayside. They're going to be left in the dirt, and they're not going to be able to keep up with you, both on the economic footing and on the technological and Unity perspective. Before I go any further, I do want to say that I am very happy with quite a few pieces of the updates in these patch notes. There are some great things. Now, if I just draw your attention over to the new content being added, we are getting 2 new bespoke star systems, 3 new anomalies, also a colony event chain, a new one, 2 archaeology sites have been added to the base game, and finally, Plantoid, Lithoid, Necroid, and Aquatic pre-sapient pops will be there for the owners of those DLCs to discover if you have those species packs. That is really nice news. I am always in favor of new content. I played this game, I think I've got around 4,000 hours now. It might only be 3.5. I'll have to check, but I can't actually remember. But yeah, from my point of view, new content is fantastic. I am very happy with the Custodian team for taking the time to add this to the game, and I'm really happy we are still playing a living game. That being said, what do I think needs to be done? What changes need to be made going forwards to achieve the vision set out at the beginning of this journey into 3.3 Libra, into this new Unity update? What do I think we could do? Because I don't think it'd be fair to simply say, no, these parts are totally wrong. They've totally not achieved what they've set out to achieve without attempting to address how they could achieve it. So I'm going to talk about that now. Alright, so what is the goal here? Well, as far as I'm concerned, the goal is to make smaller empires, that is taller empires, able to compete technologically and also able to outcompete in terms of Unity, the things you spend Unity on, that is edicts, traditions, and planetary ascension, when compared to wider empires. First off, I'm going to assume that wider empires have more colonies and therefore are more spread out across the galaxy. I'm not going to think about Void Dwellers. They are a bit of a weird one, and they may actually require some weird maths and a little bit of a change of the systems to get them to fit in. They are on the council, but we do not grant them the rank of tall. So whilst tall empires can keep up technologically and outcompete with Unity, as I've said, they should definitely be somewhat behind economically as compared to regular wide empires, or what was the regular empire before patch 3.3, and that is an empire that went as wide as it possibly could. If we are going to use the empire sprawl or empire size system, that is fine. We can do that. It is a useful tool. However, we first off need to re-weight it. Pops should be very, very low down on the weighting of this here. It should probably only contribute somewhere in the region of 20 to 30% of the overall weighting. Number of colonies should be very, very high up on the weighting. That should be 40 to 50%. And number of systems should be somewhat significant, probably 10 or 20%, at least half that of the population of your world, but definitely something reasonable, because people do like it when a tall empire has fewer systems. That is some part of the fundamental idea that we possibly should emulate here. So a reweighting, that should be there. Then on top of that, we should also increase the penalties for going over this empire sprawl. There should always be a benefit to expanding. Expansion should not be hampered in a 4X game. And if we increase the penalties, that would still be the case. It would still be good to expand. But the returns for expanding should be diminishing with regards to technology and Unity production and the ability to spend those resources. For that reason, I would say we want to increase these penalties or increase the tech cost we get from increased empire size by 4 or 5 times. This would then mean small empires, small economies would be able to keep up technologically with larger empires. This means we could have situations where a band of minor nations are able to collectively stand up to a single wide empire. As it is at present, that's simply not the case. The wider empire is going to be vastly ahead of you technologically, and your little band of merry men are not going to be able to fight them, even if your combined economic output is equivalent to this one wide empire. It could even be greater, but they'll probably have bigger and better ships, and they will simply wipe you out, knock you out of the sky. This would mean that situations like in the game Europa Universalis 4, where if you invade the Holy Roman Empire and you get too much aggressive expansion in there, the Holy Roman Empire and all of those little minor nations can completely swarm you as France and oh no, look, you're dead. Well, that should be something you are afraid of. The entire galactic community should have the weight as a single community to fight off one minor nation. As it is as a player, if you get about a quarter of the galaxy and no one else has as many systems and planets as you do, well, from that point on, you are basically unstoppable. Even in a multiplayer game, if one player has twice the number of systems or planets, twice the number of planets as any other player, they're probably going to win that game by leaps and bounds. And there is nothing the combined effort of all of these other nations, which probably represents 80-90% of the inhabited planets elsewhere in the galaxy, can do to stand up to them and can do to fight them. But all of that is very, very mathematical. It doesn't have much interesting flavor. What else could we do? Well, I think it would be very great if we made sectors important again. Make sectors great again. And therefore, it might be interesting to increase the empire sprawl of planets in a sector based on the distance that sector is from the capital. That way, if you have a very, very wide empire with your planets very, very spread out, that would mean your far-flung sectors increase your empire sprawl astronomically, or at least they increase your empire sprawl quite a lot. And that would then finally mean that wider empires are being penalized for actually being wide rather than just having lots and lots of pops. And it would also mean that habitat-based players, Void Dweller empires, would not be overly penalized in the same way as any other wide player for having many, many colonies. So if we had some sort of empire sprawl mechanic based on distance to the capital, that could go some way to fixing this. And on top of that, it would be great if we could have, please, some internal politics between these sectors. Sector governors, sector politics. Make it possibly so that sectors had different ethics to your capital. If there was some sort of difference there, we could get sector rebellions, internal civil wars, all of that sort of stuff. That is something I think we are really, really missing out on here in Stellaris. And I've got my fingers crossed that it could be coming soon. We will soon be getting disasters, which should be somewhat similar to their namesake in EU4, and hopefully with that we're going to get a whole load of internal politics and internal events shaping and rocking our nation. We really do need some of that in this game, in my own opinion. You may have a different opinion to me. Please let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. But those are some of the things I think we could do to balance the game a little bit better so that tall empires do stand a chance to compete with wider empires. On top of that, there's one more thing actually that I have not mentioned, and that is the fact that it would be kind of nice if we could get something a little bit like Civilization 5 specifically, where we had this wide-tall dichotomy. Now, to do that, we need to increase the efficiency of the pops on our planets. I think Planetary Ascensions does go somewhat of the way towards doing this. However, I think that every level of Planetary Ascension should add, and I'm not quite sure on the balance here, but either somewhere around 2.5 to 5% to your resource output and trade value on the planet. Don't increase stability because that could get capped out at 100, but if we were to increase the resource output and trade value of every planet based on its ascension tier, that means taller empires would be able to somewhat compete economically with wider empires with 3 times the number of planets and pops, and therefore we would get some varied gameplay, because that's what we're after, folks, here, isn't it? Varied and choice-based gameplay. I've briefly talked about Empire Sprawl in this video. If you'd like to hear me go a little bit more in depth about Empire Sprawl and find out exactly why I think it is that we need to increase those values, because it is a bit of a balmy idea, click the video on screen now.